item 17, page 399. So I think we've had this back now twice, so I think we've probably all got our heads around it. Is there anything you want to add, Ricky? No. Well, we can't in this case. We can't in this case.
Aye.
I'll second that, thank you.
Page 400 of 472, which is the previous report.
This is a new motion.
Ideally, someone needs to enter.
So I'll move this recommendation on page 399 as the motion. So is there anyone to second that? Okay, and then I'll accept your amendments, Councillor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Paula.
Councillors, for the purposes of this, the recommendation of the committee needs to be brought forward to council, and that's what the Mayor is endeavouring to do, noting the difficulty that the Chair and Deputy Chair would have in moving that recommendation.
Can I ask a question? If it's a recommendation from a committee, is there only, it's either up or down, or can you amend it again? Can you sort of... Okay.
You can amend it.
Yeah.
Mine's wording will be that wording, yeah. Yeah.
So just to be clear, on page 400, the motion is option B and the amendment is option A. So you're on page 400, Councillor Jeff.
Just to be clearer, the differences are one is a one-tiered system and one is two-tiered. That's the only difference, eh?
Yep. All right, so we'll...
Sorry, and B is the... No, sorry, option A is the existing regime.
Yep, yep.
Okay, Councillor Mark.
So
we're in questions.
yes, thank you. So the recommendation from Councillor Paula's committee was, that came through by vote, was option B, just for clarity. What's changed that's brought about the potential amendment from both the Chair and the Deputy Chair of that very committee?
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, I'll be happy for...
No.
Okay, so I guess we'll talk to that in the debate, but I don't, there was a majority vote, but that doesn't mean I have to support the majority vote even though I'm the chair of a committee. And that's what's happening here, and I have reflected upon it, and in discussion with Ryan, I'm of a view that the status quo is appropriate, and we will talk to that in debate.
So is this effectively just another crack at it? Is that right?
Well,
Yeah?
yeah, but people can confirm. This is a recommendation to council, And by coming to council, it gives the opportunity for council to confirm that that direction is the direction of the whole of council, or that some people have changed their mind or whatever. That's why it isn't a decision of the committee, but it's a recommendation to council. It does allow for some movement, whether people feel comfortable with that or not.
So that's a yes. Okay.
That's not the primary reason for doing it, councillor.
Thank you. No, I was asking Paula, but thank you. No, that's Paula. No, I mentioned you in it. Oh.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, point of procedure is my understanding that the chair of the committee and deputy report back the minutes and recommendation of their meeting because they couldn't feel they could personally support the majority vote. Then the mayor and another person has moved the original committee recommendation to get it on the table. That's a procedure. That's my understanding, is it not? And we've also profusely apologised to staff to put them through another third round as well.
Please note, just a point of fact, that there were five members of the whole of council absent, and so therefore I feel it's a reasonably valid position to retest.
Councillor Gary.
Just wonder, there will be a cost implication because if we go to the, I'm not sure which one's which actually. Sorry, whichever one leaves the rental subsidy at 87%, will reduce our potential income. Now I know we're not talking huge dollars here, but have we got any? I think from memory you did have some figures that showed the financial impact of this when it first came to the committee.
Yeah,
Did you or not?
Yeah, no, originally we distributed those spreadsheets which gave an indication as to the groups which may be caught up in terms of that second tier, but again we have to reiterate that the assessment takes place at the time, so we can't say a matter of fact that the difference in terms of what those particular groups are paying will definitely be the difference in terms of the revenue that we'll receive. Yeah, it's approximately, I think, 20 grand is what the general managers are reminding us of.
I can't remember
on the
what it
basis
was.
on the basis that they get over the line in terms of the other tier.
I think option B, I think you get
So the two-tiered
to
system,
about 20
the two-tiered, which has a
50 and the
87.5 and a 50, within reasonable estimates, was about a $20,000 revenue loss.
Yeah, around that figure, yeah, if I remember correctly, yeah.
Yeah. That would pay for a study on subsidising buses.
Come on, let's get this moving. We're on questions. So questions, please, Councillor Ryan.
Sorry.
Questions, please, Councillor Mark.
Oh, it's right, sorry.
Okay, so we're now moving to debate. Okay, there is no debate, so we're now moving to Councillor Jeff.
Speak to it first, is it?
I'm the mover.
Oh, sorry, yeah. You've moved.
Councillor Paula, do you want to speak?
I haven't moved either, so I am going to debate, but Ryan prefer that he's able to lead his own argument, which I support.
Councillor Hamilton.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Look, this policy was designed to provide more equity in the community occupancy policy between non-for-profits and commercial entities who potentially had a bit more financial nous, which is fair enough. The challenge for me is that it sort of misses the mark because we're talking about approximately 5% of our renters triggering that commercial rate, or the second tier rate. Within that 5%, there's been mention that potentially it will save up to $20,000 in terms of increased revenue. But the trouble is the policy isn't being tested, and our own staff said that to ascertain whether a commercial entity has $1 million, what was the criteria? Is that it's got to have $100,000 surplus, $1 million revenue and government funding, that they've actually got to delve into that entity and see their financial balance sheet and work it out. And the challenge lies in, is it a local entity or a national entity like your St John's, or do they have a local branch, or we're going to look at their national financial statement. So it actually creates a lot of confusion, and potentially saving 20,000, how much resource are we going to spend on trying to chase the policy? Our own staff have also said it's probably the best policy, community occupancy policy in the country, so why change it? The reason for an option B came up because it was time to review the existing policy and present an alternative. And as I've mentioned, I don't think the alternative hits the mark. It's all very well having this policy, but the challenge then lies in its implementation. The questions of the quantums of turnover and net profit as tools of measurement also can be tweaked by the entities involved. It's very easy to massage those figures to meet requirements. The question we have to ask ourselves as elected members, is this the best in business to put a complex bureaucratic mechanism on staff who are in their own admission recognise the policy as less than ideal, and they'll struggle to resource it, and the net gain or yield is low to no? I definitely think we should revisit this in the future, but don't think we should change the policy for policy's sake. And therefore, I think in this instance, we should stay with the status quo.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Andrew. I support all of the comments that Ryan has made, and I added a few additional ones to that. I do believe we're kind of using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. These are all charities that are defined as charities, registered as charities and operating as charities in the first place, so that they're not for profit, and if they hold any money in their funds, that's going to be vested back into their charitable purposes. What are we trying to achieve here? I understood the point of not big charities and little charities operating differently. I did understand that, but we haven't achieved anything here. We certainly aren't using it as a revenue opportunity, because it's negligible by the time you put into staff costs and times, as Ryan said. So we're not making any money out of it. So what point are we trying to make here? I think this needs a proper, decent look at it, and we should have at least afforded those people in that bracket, in that top bracket, the 5 or 6 of them, we should have afforded them the opportunity to be consulted with in a better way than we did.
Councillor Jeff.
Yeah, look, I think we have a responsibility as a council to be as efficient as possible with the funds of our ratepayers and residents. And I think why abandon an effort to do that? If we think there's an issue here where people are getting a subsidy that they probably shouldn't be getting, which is certainly how I feel, then why would we not try and plug that and save 20,000? Does 20,000 a year not matter? If you're getting significant government funding, then why should you also be subsidised by the ratepayers? Similarly, if you're doing well enough that you've got $2 million in revenue or 100k surplus, then I think you should be able to stand on your own 2 feet, or at least receive less of a subsidy than you are at the present. Why do we not have the ability to impose that discretion? Are we not good enough, or is it too hard for this organisation to do? It's just the feeling I'm getting from the chair and the deputy chair that it's in the too hard basket. I mean, why do we have to do the delving into these organisations? Why can they not supply the information, or they just don't get the subsidy? Why do we have to do all the groundwork there? So, yeah, I think this is a bit weak, this argument. I think there's money to be saved. Let's save it. Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to staff for the extra effort in this one. You're right. To me, it's not necessarily a revenue issue. It's an issue we actually looked at when I was sitting on the Well Trust many years ago, when we were looking at who's out of town, who can afford who can afford it, who can't, etc. To me, it's an issue of fairness. It's not so much a revenue issue, it's an issue of fairness. There are some charities out there who are doing very, very well, and good on them. That's absolutely fantastic. But having spent 15 years in the philanthropic sector, I feel pretty well qualified to say that we've got an extremely tight squeeze on our community facilities available to us. And it's not a matter of turfing people out of their places. But it means that some of the smaller places cannot get space. Now, I don't know any member around this table who hasn't been approached by people saying, we need some space. If you've got any space, can you help us out? There are some large charities, charitable organisations, occupying space that they could do without the subsidy for, or they could do somewhere else with, quite simply. One of the arguments I remember from this original thing in the Community Services and Environment Committee was that it's quite a bit of work for staff to delve into it. I think it was Ricky's words, delve into finding out what that, what their thresholds are, etc. Well, no, actually no. It's up to them to provide it to us. It's not for us to go looking for it. If they want the premises, they've got to prove that they qualify. It's not up to us to go looking for that information. It's up to them to, at their cost, give that information to us. So quite frankly, I think the two-tiered system, and I'm certainly not one to penalise people who are doing well, but we've got a very tight squeeze on our resources, and it's not about revenue. It's not about, it's just about a principle of fairness, and I think we need to be looking very closely at it.
I'll just jump in here. So the list is likely to include people like Plunkett, who are largely funded by government. They're not a government department, but St John's, who are largely funded as a commercial operation, even though they're a not-for-profit. What if Tainui were in one of our buildings? They'd be in there at 87.5% subsidy. So it's these big organisations that are taking a large amount of support from government and insurance companies and different places that would support them through. I'm talking about St John's with medical insurance and that type of thing. So they're almost commercial operations that are sitting in properties that are supposed to be for community use with a 87.5% discount. And I don't think that was ever the intention of the policy. Deputy Mayor Martin.
I totally respect that the arguments are finely balanced. In another part of my life, I'm on a governance board of a NGO, and we have to pay full commercial rent, no, to the best of my knowledge, council subsidies, so I do get the argument. I just, however, want to commend staff on the work they've done and stress, and I'm sure this is what Councillor Southgate meant to say, that in essence you did everything right up until the committee. It was up to the committee, us collectively as a committee, to ask you to go and do X, Y and Z. That didn't happen. There was there was a vote that went down a certain direction. But I think this is a really good example how this type of stuff is far better discussed comprehensively to committee. With respect, there's been a conversation that a number of people were away, to which I'd say, so what? So what? Watch the video, go read your order paper. It's irrelevant whether you're away or not. It's up to you to sort that issue out. But I just do want to commend staff in this case, and yeah, we'll in the end hopefully get to an outcome.
Councillor Robb.
Chair, very briefly, I'm speaking in favour of the motion. And look, the tiers 1, 2 and 3 are clearly defined in the Charities Act, and organisations that are charities know exactly which tier they fit into. In fact, it shouldn't be a major problem for staff, because if you read the first page of the notes to the financial statements, it will clearly state that we are reporting under Tier 1, Tier 2 or Tier 3. So it shouldn't be the detail that perhaps we've been alerted to. So I don't think it's as difficult to put in place, and I think there is equity. Those large organisations, some of whom the Mayor has already identified, are in a position and are still being largely subsidised with a 50% subsidy. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote. So we're voting first on the amendment.
The amendment is lost, 9 against, 3 for.
So we're now voting on the motion.
The motion is carried, 10 for, 2 against.
Okay, we're now moving to item 18 on page 369. Sorry, 469, apologies.
Bugs is like scary. Doesn't use that for.
Yes, that's fine. Would you like to introduce it?
I will, thank
But
you.
we understand it, so if you're
Yeah,
comfortable
we
with
don't
us
need to say very much about
Okay.
it because we had a fulsome
So-
workshop and on it. But this is something that's not, what I will say is that we don't have a choice as a council whether to be involved in promoting biodiversity or not. It is required of us.
Hang on, we're not debating, you're just
Oh, I thought-
introducing.
So,
You're
this-
introducing the item as the chair of that committee.
Yeah, so
So
here we
I
are.
don't want an
This-
opinion, I just want you
Okay.
to introduce it.
There's no need to. It's-
To
it's-
remind
as you
us
said-
of what it's about.
Well-
Brian, would you like to introduce it?
I was reading what page you're on.
Both trying to catch up.
All
Okay,
right, I understand where I'm at.
okay, so moved by Paula,
Seconded by Ron.
seconded by councillor Ryan. Ryan, is that okay? Okay, well, it needs to stay in chair, deputy chair's wife on there. Okay, so we'll go to the board to vote. Yes?
Give some good advice here. You're totally correct that the chair of the committee has moved the recommendation from her committee. Then the chair of the committee may wish to seek leave to actually speak to the motion, to the recommendation she's put. And I intend to
Oh,
speak,
sure,
actually.
it just
Yeah.
wasn't, I
Yep,
didn't see
okay.
anybody on the board, so.
I wasn't so much trying to give my opinion before, I was just trying to set a context around what is required of councils and biodiversity. And what I will say now that I'm in debate is that this is not a discretionary item or an add-on or an also-ran or something to move through quickly kind of item for council. It's actually a legislative requirement of councils, and it's under a number of pieces of legislation and, of course, under the regional policy statement. So we are obliged to take this seriously, and I think the staff have done a very good job in putting it together to this point. The challenge for us will be not just to leave it as a project that is done once, and it's about implementing it right through and taking the learnings. Remember that we're not anywhere near the targets we need to be for biodiversity of a city of this size, and Professor Bruce Clarkson made that quite apparent in his update for those of you that were there. And look, I'm quite excited about this because I do believe strongly that cities can grow and accommodate the built form, but they must also and can support the natural heritage and the green aspects of the city, the plants and the animals. And we must do that, and we're actually ethically obliged on behalf of the community to protect those things. Now, we had some discussion on the day about native trees versus exotic trees. I think that was a bit erroneous because there is a place for both, and this is not suggesting that every tree that goes in the ground in Hamilton becomes a native tree. This is suggesting that we do not take our eye off the ball around Indigenous biodiversity. And yes, we will plant Indigenous trees as well, but we imported trees as well, and we will have all of that going on in this space. But we're so blessed with our gully system, so I think this is excellent. Let's get on with it.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, I obviously support the recommendation. Do acknowledge the chairs of the committee's history and background in this, the totality of this area, along with other elected members. I think the issue of partnership is going to be really important, and I acknowledge Professor Bruce Clarkson and the incredible intellectual grunt that we have, particularly with the University of Waikato, Wintec and others, and I think we hopefully will use that. I also, now that we do have an environment committee back, regularly look at the, regular reporting, and I hope this structure, survives into the new term, because this is a really good and important thing, particularly even in terms of the legislation change, so that we do keep an ongoing audit in this area. So I'm really looking forward to that report by September 2019 to come back to us. Cheers.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Excuse me. I think this is a clear example of vegetative racism. Vegetative racism. Racism on a vegetable scale. Black or white? Are you being black or white? Up there with slugs and bugs and whatever. Look, and I bring you back to a more seriously thing. I absolutely think we should discriminate with the type of vegetation we put, but we should discriminate based on the utility to humans. And by that I mean, if you're looking for erosion, get the best stuff, and you might find that it is our natural stuff that's best to control erosion. There's food. There's and beauty. Beauty is a totally, it's a totally valid human concern, and that should be one of the things we use to make that decision. But to simply say because it's been here for a long time, it therefore must be the best is wrong, is irrational. There is no logic in that at all. So that's all I'm saying. I've got nothing against our native vegetation, but it's just got to have some more value than that it's just native. And that was my whole point when at the committee meeting of a couple of weeks ago. So thank you. So I think it's a wrong-headed move.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, and then I heard the last speech, and plus I'm comparing it with what Paula said. It doesn't mean to say that every single tree we have to have is native. That's not the outcome. There's also, it's one thing to be practical and pragmatic about this kind of thing, but there is also a case for being uniquely us, and largely that is preserving our natural taonga, our natural what we were. Our community outcomes clearly state that we want this to be a great river city in which to live, work, play and visit. This is an opportunity to, if we lose this, we lose it. It's gone forever. And we've lost an opportunity to be a great place to visit, to my mind, and subjectively a great place to live. So I'll be enthusiastically supporting it. That's the end.
Councillor Siggy.
Well, I had to say something as well after Councillor Mallett's speech. From what I remember is what Dr. Bruce Clarkson said was 10% of our trees is indigenous trees and the rest is imported. So I think just putting that balance a little bit righter would be good, and that sure hasn't got any, what was it called, vegetative racism. There. The other thing that I do echo Councillor Southgate is this is great having it embedded in a legislative requirement, but it is just having it as a piece of paper is wonderful, but doing actually something about it practically is the really, really, really important thing. And having a livable city with beautiful trees is just so important, and with the right birds and everything, bring that all in, so that will make our city even more beautiful than it is. Thank you.
This makes me nervous with a city that has borders as tight as what we've got, and obviously TAs like Christchurch who have very, very large lands around them that are undeveloped and that are even in native bush and even in its original condition already, or say Waipa who have say Waikato who has the Hakaramas, which are already in bush, which automatically ticks it off, which is land that can't be used for anything else apart from, you know, it's a mountain range, it's a natural area. It's very easy, but for a place like Hamilton, it is tight. And if it's going to encroach on the little land that we've got left that's undeveloped to stop us developing any of that land, then that would make me very uncomfortable. So I'm just hope that this doesn't become a rod for our own backs in the future, because of the unique situation that Hamilton and probably Tauranga would be possibly another area with our tight boundaries compared, and you look at Auckland with the Waitakaris, and those areas are already inside their TA, inside the territorial boundary, so it's easy for them to get that 10% already. So in this case, in this city, this just makes me a little nervous, especially when we're only at we're not at 10% already, which means that something's got to come in somewhere to get to that 10%. I think we're at about 8 or 9%. We're at 2%. So we're going to find 8% more. I thought with the gullies and the roadsides that brought us to about 8%. But anyway, my time's up. So just that's just my area of caution on this. Thank you, Councillor Paula.
Right of reply, if I may. Thank you. I'm hearing a little bit of misinformation in the debate, but that's okay because this is a project that's in its infancy. I think the percentage doesn't refer to acquiring more and more land. It refers to the amount of green space in Indigenous vegetation. So if we, from what Bruce Clarkson said, if we go back to a more vigilant approach on our gully system and our existing green reserves, Lake Waiwhakareke and the like, Fairfield Project, etc., if we focus on those, we can get quite close to our 10% without requiring another patch of green space. We've also got a very untapped opportunity that as we develop our green reserves that are provided for in growth areas to, there again, increase the overall proportion of Indigenous biodiversity. I also heard this referred to as an erosion issue. It isn't. It's completely separate to that. What trees you may or may not put in to stop a riverbank eroding, willows or whatever else, for example, is completely separate to this. This is about the quality of the natural environment and what lives in there, native fish, birds, flora and fauna, the whole lot. And we can actually do that while we grow. And that's why it's really important to have this biodiversity project. And I tell you what, in Hamilton we are so lucky because we have some of the most renowned New Zealand experts in ecology, and they're internationally recognised. In fact, they have been awarded international awards for the quality of their understanding and data around our environment. So that's a huge bonus to us as a city. We could show some leadership and show the other growing cities how you can be a great city as well as a green city. I think we can do that.
We'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried, 10-4, 2 against.
Okay, and we'll now hand over to the Chief Executive, Acting Chief Executive, or David if he's here. No.
Apologies, David's doing job interviews this afternoon.
Okay.
Look, the report's reasonably clear, and I love it when the Chief Executive gives me his report to defer a report that he should have delivered by December, but joking aside, we've got Paul Menz who's here today. I'm not sure if you've all met Paul, who's our business transformation director. So he's the person who's working with senior leadership team to hunt down the savings. Essentially, we just wanted to defer the report until Paul's got his feet under the table. We've loaded him up with how many reports? I think it's about a metre high, isn't it, Paul? So he's having a good look at things, and obviously he's starting to have a sniff and a poke at everything, and working with leaders around the organisation. The good news is, as you can see from the last paragraph, is that we're faring quite well on the vacancy factor part of the savings. And Paul will be able to report back, and once he's got his head around things, the other savings that we're finding through, obviously through Chris's team, through the capital delivery group, and also other parts of council too, where there's obviously efforts being made to become more efficient and effective and hunt down those savings as they arise. Obviously, there's always other things on the other side of the ledger too, which you're aware of, things like slips and what have you as well. So I'll just give Paul a bit of a chance to have a good look at this, and then you'll get a comprehensive report in February. Happy to answer any questions. You might want to ask Paul on the spot and ask him some questions too.
Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Lance. You mentioned, I heard the word vacancy in there somewhere in your word, and I'm aware that we are at the moment, have for quite some time, making savings because we are somewhat understaffed. And I don't want to overstate it or understate it, but I just want to know that if Richard was sitting there, he could confidently say where the fact that we have got vacancies is not reducing the level of service in our permitting and complaints and all that sort of carry on.
Yeah, so there's a couple of parts to that. So the vacancy factor is essentially if someone leaves and then you go through recruitment and all that sort of thing, there's always a lag period, so that you end up with a bit of a saving.
But that's a business and as usual thing, which you wouldn't. Yeah.
The second part to that is so that's the normal, churn of a normal organisation, and I have to say our turnover has reduced somewhat from 2 or 3 years ago. But the other side of that is there are some roles which are hard to recruit for nationally, and
And that's, are you specifically relating to sort of permitting, consulting? Types.
Yeah. So in Corey's area, building inspection and things like that, we could do with some more people in that area. Obviously, the team's working really hard to do that and to recruit and to retain people. The staff that are there are, doing extra hours and things like that, which, obviously there's a cost to that. But so I can give you assurance we're doing as much as we can to make sure we've got the bums on seats to maintain our levels of service. So generally, you can see that at the Finance Committee when we bring forward the report on our non-financial KPIs, are we meeting our targets and those sorts of things. So we're going okay, and I'd have to say we are recruiting. We have been quite successful, and our brand is quite good at the moment too. So we are recruiting some very good people, not only from within the Waikato but beyond the Waikato too.
Because a failure to get inspectors out stops work, stops buildings getting built. Guys miss track, miss concrete pours, all sorts of stuff, and it just trickles on. And we don't, it doesn't affect our finances, but it certainly, really impedes the wealth and the creation of wealth and prosperity out there.
We have a recruitment expert within David's team, and Michelle.
And I'm not saying this is easy.
She prioritises her work around those the critical positions.
Yeah.
So
Just seeking a little bit of reassurance in a way. This was originally sold to us as reimagining local government as a whole new way of doing things. And I understand, Chris's role and there's some significance there. But I mean, it's not just a cutting thing, is it? I mean, it's a whole new way of doing things. So that was the basis of it at the time. I'm hoping that is still the case.
yeah, absolutely. So it's about looking at how we can do things differently, and Paul and I have been getting to know each other, and we've been having some really good conversations with his experience and about how we can challenge the way we're doing things. And just an example is I was telling Paul that a number of staff, including myself, did a design thinking course at Wintec the other day. It actually makes you think quite differently about things, rather than sort of and look for, you know, a bit of lateral thinking about how you can attack issues or opportunities in different ways and that sort of thing. And I think someone like Paul coming in, who's got experience in a number of different organisations, I think, you know, that gives you those fresh eyes as well. So it's definitely part of that.
Okay.
And it's about challenging the way we're going to do things. And you know, rather than just sort of, you know, the efficiencies and the effectiveness and saving a few dollars here, the nickel and diming and that sort of stuff, is how do we actually become transformational in the way that we do things.
Okay, thanks, Lance.
Councillor Robb.
Thanks. Can I ask Paul, you mentioned, Lance, you're happy for me to ask Paul a question, just in terms of the fact that you're new on the block and you've got a fresh pair of eyes, just on what you've seen so far, and given that, you know, we had a bit of a challenge from Audit New Zealand during the long-term plan as to our ability to achieve this level of savings, do you think that, you know, your first cut and your first look, without committing you to this, that there are opportunities out there where we will be able to, as Councillor Jeff said, you know, do some reimagining and get runs on the board more so than just that sort of plus and minusing of the things that we could have done anyway?
Yes, Rob. From my experience of 2 weeks, I'll just make it very clear, I don't know what I don't know. I think there has to be an awful lot of speed, and I think in the end of the day, you'll find probably greater than the level you're aiming for, but you've got to be prepared to look at the models you're doing and whether that's going to be the issue, whether you want to do things differently. Some of the things you see as sacred and in the domain of this forum may need to change, or you're realising that's the cost of having that level of management. A lot of staff have said to me, and have got views, how wide does my remit go? And some staff are worried that I am just that hatchet, and I've been branding myself internally that I'm anything but that. My job isn't actually to find the savings, the nickel and dime stuff. I think those actually fall into the domains of the existing structure. I can challenge the GMs, but they've got the budget, they've put it together, they've got a free view. If you want a role like this, I think you're looking to see things very differently, and that's, I think, we can't, the reality is New Zealand local government can't keep occupying with the same level of cost inflation that's existing at the moment. So it has to mean we do have to change the way we're doing things. And look, I wish I could give you the golden bullets now, and I haven't, and I do have ideas, but I'm respectful enough to know that I come into one idea and the likes of the GMs will say, well, hang on a minute, we've done that, and this was the downside of what you were thinking. So I'm excited. I feel really privileged looking at it and being right in the circle. But look, I think there's a whole issue that we've talked about challenging and in a positive way sweating the assets that are around, and I don't believe the council's got the room or the capacity to spend the level of capex that you've budgeted for. I just don't think it's got the capacity to do that. A lot's going to come out of there. That vacancy factor, quite a lot of savings are factored into that. And I think we do have to reduce our staff count and become more efficient. How we do that in a sinking lid process, I don't know, and changing business models are the areas I'm seeing. So I'm excited about it, and I've enjoyed that reading that Lance referred to.
Thank you. And we are paying you. We're not waiting till February report before we pay you.
I think it happened last night. I think it happened last night.
Oh, good. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Paul.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, and I'm not being picky, but I'm just sort of trying to be an appropriate governor about this. Why is this being deferred? I mean, you know, we're just putting everything back a little bit. Again, it's to give Paul understanding, but why didn't we find Paul earlier?
Why didn't we hire him earlier?
Yeah.
He's going to love this answer. To find someone of the calibre of Paul's taken a bit longer than we thought.
Okay. All right, that's good enough for me. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Marson.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're also dealing with the whole of local government issue, and particularly with cities such as ours. Does that work obviously involve some dialogue, collaboration with other TAs? You know, obviously you've got the issue of regional services, and there may be shining examples here and in Australia around some other stuff that's been done.
Look, I don't want to spend and charge the council a lot of work to go around the world looking at things. I've got a lot of, being a PwC executive, I do have a lot of resources they have available. So The Chief Executive was very clear to me to use my network where I can look, and he has planted a number of what he calls low-hanging fruit areas we should really look at and kick and test. So the messaging has been, for me, is to look at everything I can to upset people, ask for forgiveness, get on with it and see what you can do things differently with your experience and see why the hell we can do this, and can you be convinced of why this is the right way of doing it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote. Okay, we'll move to exclude the public. Yes. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mark. He moved. All those for, any against? Carried. Okay, so is the camera off?